The morning air is cool in the town of Nuremberg as the first soft light of dawn creeps over the wooden rooftops and cobblestone streets. The sky begins to change color, shifting from a deep purple to pale blue as the people begin to stir in their homes ready for another day. In the year 1560, a farmer steps out to feed his animals and notices a strange glow in the distance above the trees. His breath catches as he sees shapes in the sky, shapes that do not belong there, and he calls for his wife to come outside. She rushes to his side with their children clinging to her skirt, and they all stare upward as more lights appear in the sky above. The church steeples in the center of town. A group of merchants unloading carts see the strange lights and drop their crates on the ground. One man points and shouts as the lights grow brighter and begin to move in patterns. Across the sky, neighbors open their windows and doors, leaning out to see what has stolen the morning from them, and they see it too. They see the spheres glowing red and blue and black, spinning slowly as if studying the town below. The shapes are joined by crosses and tubes in the sky, like metal rods that glint in the growing light. The people can hear a strange hum, a low sound that seems to come from the sky itself, and the shapes begin to move faster. They swirl and spin, and the people begin to gather in the streets, forgetting their morning chores and their bread baking in their ovens, their eyes fixed on the heavens. The children clutch their mothers' skirts, and the men stand with their mouths open as the sky above Nuremberg becomes alive with color and motion. The shapes move in formations as if they are dancing or fighting each other, and the air begins to feel thick with tension. The church bells ring without anyone pulling the ropes, as if the towers themselves can sense the fear and awe in the people below. The farmer, who first saw the lights, feels his knees tremble as he sees two spheres collide in the sky, sending a flash of red light that makes the children scream. The glow reflects off the windows of the town, and the people see their own frightened faces in the glass. The hum grows louder, and the shapes continue to clash above them, sending beams of blue and white light that streak across the sky like lightning. But there is no storm. The air is calm except for the strange electric charge that makes the hairs on their arms stand up. Some of the people fall to their knees in the street, praying to God to protect them from what they believe must be a sign of judgment or the end of days, but others cannot look away. They are frozen, watching the dance of colors and light and shapes that do not belong to their world. They see the crosses in the sky spinning and pointing down as if marking the earth, and they see the spheres split apart and rejoin, like living things made of metal and fire. The light is so bright it hurts their eyes, but they do not turn away because they cannot. They are witnessing something that will stay in their minds forever, as the sky above Nuremberg becomes a stage for a battle. No one understands. They can only watch and feel the fear and the wonder fill their hearts as the morning sun rises slowly behind the shapes that continue to move in the sky. The people of Nuremberg begin to speak in hushed voices as the light fades from the sky, leaving behind a strange silence that feels heavy in the early morning air. The farmer rises slowly from the ground, brushing dirt from his hands as he looks at his wife and children, their faces pale and eyes wide with the memory of what they have seen. Merchants gather their dropped goods with shaking hands, glancing up at the empty sky as if afraid the shapes will return at any moment. Mothers hold their children close, whispering words of comfort that do little to calm the fear that clings to them like the morning mist. The church bells finally fall silent, their echoes fading into the distance as the people look around at one another, searching for answers that no one has the courage to speak. The smoke from the falling shapes still rises in thin black columns outside the town, and some of the braver men decide to follow it to see what has fallen from the sky. They move in small groups, walking through the dewy grass, their boots wet and cold as they leave the safety of the town behind them. The fields are quiet, except for the distant cries of birds, startled by the strange events of the morning. As the men approach the areas where the smoke rises, they see patches of scorched earth, blackened and warm to the touch, with small piles of ash scattered across the grass. There is no sign of the shapes that fell from the sky, no metal or strange machines, only the burn marks, and the smell of smoke, and something bitter that stings their noses. They look at each other with confusion and fear, unable to understand what they have found. They gather pieces of the blackened earth and small clumps of ash, carrying them back to the town to show the others, hoping someone might know what it means. The people of Nuremberg gather around the men as they return with their strange findings, touching the burned earth with cautious fingers and holding the ash up to the light as if expecting it to reveal the secrets of the morning sky. The children stare with wide eyes while the elders shake their heads. speaking softly about omens and warnings from the heavens. Some believe that God has sent a sign to the people of Nuremberg, a message to repent and change their ways before it is too late. Others whisper that it was not God but something else, something from beyond the stars, that came to their town. For reasons they cannot understand, the town printer begins to work on a woodcut to capture the sight for those who could not see it, with their own eyes carving the shapes and the lights into the wood, so that the memory will not be lost. The image of the spheres, the crosses, the beams of light and the falling shapes will soon be printed and shared with other towns, spreading the story of the morning when the sky over Nuremberg became a battlefield. The people do not know if the shapes will return, if the lights will once again dance above their homes, or if the silence that now hangs over their town will remain forever. They can only wait and watch the sky each morning, hoping to see nothing but clouds and birds, yet fearing that one day the lights will come back, bringing with them the fear and wonder that has changed the people of Nuremberg forever. The people of Nuremberg stand in the narrow streets, unable to look away from the sky above them as the strange shapes continue their dance of light and shadow. The colors change from red to blue to black as the spheres and crosses move in patterns that no one can understand. The air feels heavy with the scent of smoke and something sharp that makes their eyes water and their skin prickle. The humming sound grows louder, like a swarm of invisible bees filling the space around them and vibrating in their chests. The children cover their ears and press their faces against their mothers as the light flickers like a storm of colors overhead. The men watch with wide eyes, some of them holding their hats in their hands, as if afraid the wind will steal them away, while others grip the hands of their wives, unable to find words to explain what they are seeing. The church bells ring again and again without stopping, as if the towers themselves are crying out to the heavens in fear. The shapes in the sky begin to move faster, clashing together with flashes of bright light that make the people flinch and cry out. The light reflects on the cobblestones and the windows, casting strange shadows on the walls of the houses, and the faces of the people below the spheres split apart and merge again, sending streaks of light that cut across the sky, leaving trails that hang in the air like glowing scars. The crosses spin and tumble through the clouds, moving in ways that no bird or man-made object could ever move. The people can feel the ground tremble beneath their feet as the humming grows deeper and the light grows brighter. The merchants who were unloading their carts have abandoned their goods in the street. The farmer, who saw the lights first, is on his knees now, clutching the earth, as if it is the only thing keeping him from being taken into the sky with the strange shapes. The children begin to cry, and the mothers hold them close, whispering prayers into their hair, while the men stand frozen, watching as the shapes in the sky continue their strange dance. The people do not know what to do. They are caught between fear and wonder, unable to move, unable to run, unable to look away. They watch as some of the shapes in the sky begin to fall, slowly drifting down toward the fields outside the town with trails of smoke behind them. The light from the falling shapes is dim, but the people can see it clearly against the pale morning sky. Some of the shapes seem to catch fire as they fall, burning with a bright red flame before disappearing in the distance, leaving only smoke rising into the sky. The people hold their breath, waiting for the sound of the crash, but there is only silence as the shapes vanish behind the trees. The sky begins to clear as the shapes that remain rise higher into the air, their lights growing fainter as they move away. The humming sound fades until it is gone, and the only sound left is the crying of the children and the ringing of the church bells. The people of Nuremberg stand in the streets, looking at the empty sky, where moments before they had seen something that would change them forever. They do not know what they have witnessed, but they know that they will never forget the morning when the sky came alive with lights and shapes that did not belong to this world. The days pass in Nuremberg, but the memory of the strange lights in the sky does not fade. The people continue their work in the fields and the markets, but they look up at the sky often with wary eyes, searching for any sign that the shapes might return. The children draw the spheres and crosses in the dirt with sticks as they play, while the mothers watch them closely, afraid that the lights might come back and take their children away in the dark of night. The fathers speak in low voices around the table, wondering what the shapes were and why they appeared above their town. Some of them believe that it was a sign of war, a warning that battles will soon come to their land. Others think it was a message from the heavens telling them to repent and turn away from their sins before it is too late. The town printer finishes his woodcut, and people gather around to see the image carved in sharp lines. The shapes in the sky, the beams of light, the frightened faces of the people below. The woodcut is printed and shared with travelers who take it to other towns, spreading the story of the day when the sky above Nuremberg came alive with lights and shapes. No one could explain. Priests preach about the event in churches, telling their people to pray for forgiveness and protection from the strange powers that showed themselves in the sky. Old men tell stories to the children by the fires at night, their voices low and serious as they describe the way the lights moved and the sound that filled the air. The children listen with wide eyes, unable to sleep as they imagine the shapes returning to the sky above their homes. One night, a merchant returning from a nearby village claims he saw a strange light in the distance, moving slowly across the sky. He says it was not a star or a lantern, but something different, something that glowed with a soft red light and moved in a way no bird could move. The people of Nuremberg gather again in the streets, looking up at the dark sky, searching for the lights the merchant described, but the sky remains empty and silent. The fear and wonder never leave them, and even as they return to their lives, they cannot forget what they saw in the morning sky. The town feels different now, as if it is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The birds seem quieter in the mornings, and the air feels heavy, as if it remembers the shapes that moved through it. The people of Nuremberg begin to keep candles burning in their windows at night, hoping the light will protect them from the strange powers they cannot understand. The children are told to stay close to their homes and not wander too far from the safety of the town. The fields where the shapes fell and burned, the earth remained blackened, and nothing grows there even as the seasons change. The people avoid these places, afraid of what might still linger in the ground. They speak of the morning when the sky came alive in hushed voices, their eyes turning to the sky as they wonder if the shapes will ever return, bringing with them the fear, the wonder, and the mystery that has become a part of their lives forever. Deep in the cold silence of the Ural Mountains in 1959, young hikers set out for an expedition. Strong skiers full of laughter and hope, they pitched their orange tent on the slopes of Kolatsiakal, the mountain of the dead day, cooked their last meal, and wrote in their journals about the howling wind that night. Something came for them. They tore out of their tent barefoot and half-dressed in the freezing dark, fleeing into the deep snow with no light and no shelter. Some ran until their bones broke, some huddled under trees, their bodies found days later, with twisted limbs and empty eyes, and others with strange orange burns on their skin. The tent was found with cuts from the inside, the fabric flapping in the icy wind, their boots still lined up neatly inside as if they had intended to return. The investigators found high levels of radiation on some of their clothes, and the trees around their camp were charred as if seared by a heat no one could explain. People in nearby villages spoke of strange orange lights in the sky on the night the hikers died, lights that hovered and danced above the slopes, lights that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Whispers began about military tests, about secret weapons, about the hikers witnessing something they should not have seen. Others claimed the mountain spirits, the ones the indigenous Mansi spoke about, had woken in anger, that the hikers had disturbed the sacred snow. But some believed that a craft had come down from the sky that night, a craft that glowed with a silent orange light and hovered above the white slopes, its engines humming in the thin air, sending vibrations through the ground and through the bones of the hikers who looked up and saw something impossible in that frozen darkness. Maybe they fled because they saw it land, maybe they fled because they heard the low hum and the wind growing louder until it was all they could hear. Maybe they fled because they saw figures moving in the glow, figures that were not human, moving closer through the blowing snow with eyes like burning coals. The official reports tried to close the case with an explanation of a compelling natural force, but there was no name for the terror frozen on the hikers' faces, no explanation for the burned and crushed bodies with injuries that made no sense, and no footprints from attackers in the snow around them. The case was closed with a hush, but locals still tell stories of the orange lights that sometimes return to Kolatsiakal, moving silently through the storms, stopping above the mountain and disappearing into the clouds, and the hikers remain a mystery in the snow. 9 souls lost to the cold, and perhaps to something that came down from the stars, leaving only whispers and fear and the soft hum of a craft that may have hovered above the frozen silence before returning to the dark sky where it came from. In Montana, 1967, at Maelstrom Air Force Base, the cold morning began like any other. The guards at the missile silos drank coffee and checked the fences, while deep underground men in uniform monitored the nuclear missiles that could end the world with a single command. Then the alarms began to scream, lights flashing red in the control room as the missiles One by one went offline without warning. The men tried to restart the systems, but the missiles remained dead, dark, and useless. As if something invisible held them in place above the silos, security teams stared at the sky and saw a red glowing orb hovering silently. It moved slowly across the missile fields, stopping above each silo for minutes at a time. While the alarms continued to blare, the orb pulsed with a strange light, like breathing in the dark, cold air, while men with rifles stood frozen, not knowing if they should fire, not knowing what would happen if they did. Some men fell to their knees, praying that the object would leave, that it would not unleash whatever it carried. The object moved without sound, shifting direction without turning, as if it had no weight. No air, no rules. It finished its silent inspection of each missile and lifted into the sky, disappearing with a flash that left their eyes burned with after images. The systems remained dead for hours, until suddenly, with no explanation, the missiles came back online. The control lights blinked green again, as if nothing had happened. The men in the control room looked at each other, not speaking but knowing they had seen something they would never forget. The incident was reported up the chain to the highest levels of the Air Force, but the story was buried in reports and classified files. The world outside never knew that for hours the most powerful weapons on Earth were disabled by a red orb that hovered above them, silent and watching. Some believed it was a test from the visitors above, a warning that the weapons of men could be turned off at any time, that humanity was playing with fire it could not control. Others believed it was something even stranger, a message that there were watchers in the sky ready to intervene if humans ever went too far. The guards who saw the red orb spoke of the way it seemed alive, the way it moved with purpose, the way the air felt heavy when it was near, and how the silence that followed was the heaviest silence they had ever felt. The reports say that after the orb left, there were no tracks, no heat signatures, no radiation that could explain what had happened. Just empty skies over the cold fields of Montana, and the silent fear that the red light would return one day to remind them that the watchers were still there, waiting in the dark above the earth, waiting to see what humanity would do next, holding the power to end the silence or to let the silence remain. Over the cold, deep waters near San Diego in 2004, us Navy pilots took off from the Nimitz to intercept something strange that radar had picked up, something moving fast, dropping from 60,000 feet to sea level in seconds. The pilots in their Super Hornets scanned the ocean, and then they saw it, a white, oblong object the size of a bus, hovering just above the waves, moving side to side, like a ping-pong ball with no wings, no exhaust, no sound. It was just there, defying everything they knew about flight. The pilots tried to get a lock on it, but it kept moving, flicking away before the targeting systems could catch it. One pilot, Dave Fravor, dived down to get a closer look, and the object turned to face him, reacting as if it was aware, watching him. The water below it was churning like something was just under the surface. The object shot up to meet him, and then in a blink it was gone. The pilots' voices on the recordings were filled with shock and laughter as they tried to process what they had seen. The radar operators on the Princeton tracked it reappearing 60 miles away in under a minute, something no aircraft could do, and it hovered there waiting as if it knew they would find it again when the pilots returned. They tried to explain what they saw, but there was no explanation. The object rotated in the sky, showing no visible means of propulsion, no wings, no rotors, no heat. It simply existed in the air, moving with a grace that defied physics, and then it was gone, leaving the pilots with the feeling that they had just witnessed something that should not exist. Years later, the video would be released to the public, showing the tic-tac-shaped craft in grainy black and white as the targeting systems tried to follow it as it rotated and darted away. The Pentagon confirmed the videos were real, confirming the objects were unidentified. And the world paused for a moment, looking up at the sky and wondering what else was out there. The pilots who saw the craft said it changed the way they saw the world. They had trained for war, for threats from Earth, not from something that moved like thought, something that played with gravity, like a toy. And the sea below the craft on that day churned and foamed as if something large was waiting under the waves, something that never surfaced, something that left behind only questions and silence, and the knowledge that in the skies above the ocean, in the hidden depths below, there are things watching, things waiting, things that move with the speed of light and the calm of eternity, leaving human technology and human understanding in the dust of the sky as they vanish, leaving nothing behind but the whisper of impossible wind and the echo of the pilots' voices saying, "Did you see that? What the hell was that?" And the silent answer that comes from the dark. "Above the sea, we are here." In 1973, in Pascagoula, Mississippi, two men named Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker were fishing on the river banks under the darkening sky. The air was still, the water calm, when suddenly a strange buzzing sound filled the air, and a glowing blue light appeared above the river. They turned to see a craft descending, silently hovering just above the water. It was shaped like a football with blinking lights, casting strange reflections on the black water. Then the side of the craft opened and three beings floated out. They were not like the beings of stories. They had no necks, and their skin was pale and gray, with pointed ears and claws for hands. They moved like machines floating across the ground without walking. The two men froze as the beings took them with clawed hands and lifted them into the air. They could not scream, they could not fight. They felt paralyzed, their minds filled with a strange humming. As they were carried into the craft inside, the light was blinding, and the air felt thick. Charles could barely move, as he felt something cold and mechanical scanning him. Calvin felt a buzzing in his head as he drifted in and out of awareness, seeing shadows moving around him. The beings made no sounds. The inside of the craft was cold metal, and humming energy lights pulsing in the walls, as if the ship was alive. The examination was brief, but felt like an eternity. Then, just as suddenly as it began, they were returned to the riverbank. Standing in the darkness, the craft lifted silently, vanishing into the black sky, leaving only the ripples on the water and the terrified breathing of the two men. They drove straight to the sheriff's office, shaking, unable to speak clearly, telling the deputies that something had taken them. The sheriff decided to leave them alone in a room, secretly recording their conversation to see if they were lying. But on the tape, the two men were heard crying and praying, whispering about what had happened, asking God to protect them, saying no one would ever believe what they saw. Calvin was only 19 and wanted to hide. Charles was older and wanted the world to know, but both were changed forever. The sheriff knew they were not lying, their fear too real, too raw, and when the story hit the news, reporters and curious people flooded the small town. Some mocked them, some believed them, but they never changed their story for the rest of their lives. Calvin tried to stay silent, but the memory haunted him, the feeling of cold hands, the buzzing in his head, the blinding light that filled him with a fear he could never explain. The Pascagoula abduction became one of the most famous UFO cases in history, a reminder that sometimes the visitors do not just hover in the sky, sometimes they come down to the quiet rivers in the dark to take people and leave them forever, marked by the silence that follows when the light fades and the craft disappears back into the stars, leaving behind only whispers and fear under the endless dark sky. In 2019, the world paused when the Pentagon confirmed that the videos showing unknown objects moving with impossible speed and grace were real. The clips showed black and white footage of Navy pilots tracking something that rotated in the air, moved against the wind, and accelerated faster than any known aircraft. The pilots' voices filled with shock, asking, "What is that? And how is it doing that?" The objects had no wings, no exhaust trails, no heat signatures, yet they hovered, dropped, and turned in ways that made no sense to the laws of physics. People around the world, who had always looked up and wondered, felt a chill, as the official confirmation meant that the skies above were not empty. The pilots who saw these objects spoke about how they would appear out of nowhere, fly alongside the jets for minutes, and then vanish without a trace. Radar operators reported tracking them diving from 80,000 feet to sea level in under a second, moving like thoughts across the sky, sometimes near military training areas, sometimes over the open ocean, leaving the pilots helpless as their advanced systems struggled to keep up. For decades, people had spoken of lights in the sky, of objects that moved silently over fields and mountains, of crafts that hovered over roads and rivers, but now the confirmation came from the highest levels. The unidentified aerial phenomena were real, and they were still here. The Pentagon released reports admitting they could not explain what these objects were, and they could not rule out that they were not from this world. In the shadows of government rooms, analysts and officials read reports of encounters from pilots who described feeling watched as the objects moved near them, and then vanished pilots who spoke of the silence that followed when the crafts left, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. People around the world began to look up at the sky at night with new eyes. The stars above seemed closer, the darkness seemed deeper, as the question of what is out there became a question of who is out there. The watchers in the sky did not announce themselves, they did not land on the White House lawn, they did not speak, but they moved in the silence of the clouds, above the oceans, above the forests, above the deserts, moving with calm precision, waiting, watching as humanity continued its struggles. Below, the visitors had been seen by pilots, by soldiers, by children, and by those who never wanted to see but could never forget. And as the world moved forward, with its wars and its hopes and its fears, the crafts in the sky remained above, sometimes a flash of light, sometimes a shape in the clouds, sometimes a shadow, moving against the stars, a reminder that humanity is not alone under the vast darkness, and the watchers in the sky may one day reveal themselves, or they may remain, as they have always been, moving in the silence above, watching, waiting, reminding the world that history's strangest UFO sightings are only the beginning.